Welcome to Life Empowers with Melissa Oden. Where there is life, there is hope. Where there is life, there's a place for love to grow, and love emboldens and strengthens. Where there is life, there's an opportunity to grow and be empowered. I'm living testament to that, and you are too. And if you don't yet feel like your life is testament to this, don't despair and don't stop listening to this podcast. This is exactly why I'm doing it. Thanks for joining me this week as we delve into so many life-affirming topics. Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Monica Cline of It Takes a Family. If you listened to part 1, I hope that you were not only encouraged by Monica's incredible strength, her boldness to share her experiences, to allow her life to be transformed from where she was to where she is now. I hope you also were really encouraged by her wisdom. Every time I sit down with Monica, our conversations just really hit home to me. The depth of what she knows and how she wants to pass that along to other people. And I think as a mother of growing girls, that is really important to me, that I am raising them in a manner that is healthy and helpful. And I think all of us as parents can use reminders and support on this journey. And so I hope that you find Monica is one of those people who can support you. When we left part 1 of our conversation, Monica was really starting to process through when she realized that there was more going on. More going on in Planned Parenthood, the abortion industry. There was more going on in our culture. And she was starting to go through this process of realizing the role that she had been in. And so I want to start there to just recap a little bit about where Monica was sitting at and what she was wrestling with. And then you're going to hear the rest of Monica's incredible story. At the end, of course, you're going to hear more about how to connect with Monica. And I hope that you do. Don't let this be a one and done kind of thing. Listening to this podcast, absolutely. I hope that you find it informative and helpful. But I also hope that you take it and you utilize it in your own life to improve maybe your school, your community, and your own family. Here's part 2 of my conversation with Monica.
I also began to realize how abortion was always the only option. And I knew, and I started to question these people that I was working with, because honestly, these were people that I felt I had grown up with because they had hired me right out of college and they were grooming me for this job. And so I naively was just sharing with them, these were my friends, like, guys, do you realize that we really do promote abortion as the only option? And they're looking at me and they're like, Monica, what are you talking about? And I was really pointing out to them that we are always promoting abortion. And when adoption agencies want to come to our conferences, we scoff that they want to be there. We don't ever invite them. We don't talk about adoption. We don't talk about the option of keeping your baby, and how you could keep your baby, even if you become a single parent. And we don't talk about those options. And so slowly and slowly, I began to change, and really I just really got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. The more I learned about Planned Parenthood, the more I learned about their view of our children, the more I knew that it was wrong, it was dangerous, and that we were destroying families.
Yeah, I want to pause for a second because that was all so incredibly powerful. And you and I have had a lot of these conversations over the last year about what you do and what you've seen and your personal experiences and mine. And even now, Monica, as you were sharing about those students, I just sat here with my eyes closed and I can picture it in my head, and not just as a parent and not just as a professional now, but it takes me back to really the early 2000s, when I was providing outreach to schools. I was in a completely different role. I worked for a domestic violence and sexual assault agency, and I provided outreach to a lot of schools talking about dating violence and sexual assault, right? And sexual abuse. And I got, it chokes me up a little bit just thinking about it, because out of, probably tens of thousands of people I've spoken to now over the years, right? In one respect or another, those kids stick with me. I can remember the classrooms, right? I mean, and it wasn't even really a classroom, right? It was a room in like a community college, right? Where some of these kids went to alternative school. And I can remember their faces, right? Like 20, 25 years later, I can still remember those faces and just how much they needed, not just someone to come talk to them, but someone to listen, someone that they knew they could approach and ask questions. And you did something that was so life changing for them when you were willing to see them, right? And see how your words, the information you were giving them, was truly impacting them. And so it changed their lives when that switch came on for you, and they changed your life. And I just can't, I can't not acknowledge that, because people wonder sometimes, right? Like, how do clinic workers have this change of heart? How do you experience a conversion? And there was this two-way street that happened.
That's right. Yeah, it was definitely a two-way street. As an outreach worker, I worked with all kinds of people, because the government funding, at that time was very much about reaching the highest risk. That meant I was working with, according to grant terminology, people of color, people of childbearing age. It also meant that I was speaking to drug users, intravenous drug users. I would go to rehab centers. I would go to prisons. And but it was always the children. It was the children that I felt, okay, I can't no, like, I need to protect these kids. Like, they don't have to start this and end up where I've seen other adults. And in all honesty, even the adults deserve this information as well. They don't need to be hearing that they should continue with their IV drug use. But especially with our children. And so, it was a conviction time. I just couldn't do that. I could not in good conscience really. I say at the beginning, I think I did, but as time went on, I couldn't do that anymore with these kids. I was really, I like the words you use, that I really saw them. And that's one of the things that I teach parents today is, the whole point of why I'm also coming out of this is, and what I'm doing today with It Takes a Family, is because of what I mentioned earlier. These ideologies paint family and parents as jokes. I'm just going to say it, listeners. If you're a mom and a dad, or you want to become a mom and a dad, these ideologies think you're a joke. They want to diminish family and diminish parents because they know that parents are powerful. And if parents have the right education and the right information that they need, and that realization that you are the primary educator and authority over your child, then you would be leading your child. And so many parents have really abdicated their responsibility and their authority for their children to public schools or to nurses or to Planned Parenthood, when the reality is that you can do this for yourself. And so that's why I created It Takes a Family, because these ideologies are trying to destroy family and diminish parents and convince parents to just hand over your children to the public school or to all these different ideologies for them to teach them. And I'm saying, no, parents, you are absolutely powerful. And the truth is that there is no one on the face of this earth that means more to your child than you. You are their hero. I mean, I don't care how many mistakes you've made. Here's the truth. In my experience, also having been a house parent at a shelter for children who'd been severely abused by their parents, regardless of that abuse, the number one thing that every child in there wanted was to be reunited with their parent and for that parent to love them. Even after all of that abuse, children have this innate need for their parents to love them and guide them and lead them. So when the culture tells parents that you're uneducated, ill-equipped, old-fashioned, which is what they're telling your children, you need to realize that you are absolutely powerful. This is why Planned Parenthood has chosen to use parenthood in their title, because
Mhm.
family and parenthood is absolutely integral and powerful. It is the most powerful position that you can have. And so you don't have to have a bachelor's degree. You don't have to have a certification. You just need to be a parent and be able to connect with your child. And what you said there is, Melissa, is that I saw these children, and that's what your children need. They need you to see them. They may look like you, they may even act like you a little bit, but they're really not your mini me. They are unique individuals who want to be seen just like you want to be seen. And so what I tell parents is that if you want to protect your child from these ideologies that are rampant everywhere, there's several things that you need to do. One, you need to remove them from constantly being, bombarded by things that they don't need to be bombarded by. So if you know that they're being exposed to an environment where they're constantly being attacked and someone's constantly trying to change their values and their belief systems, and number one, you need to remove them from that situation. But really, what's also very important is you need to see your children. You need to see them as unique individuals. You need to recognize it and acknowledge it and model it to them. If your child likes to draw, even if they're not the greatest drawer in the world, if they're not an artist, it doesn't matter. If they're just loving that they're drawing, then you love it too. If they want to talk to you about, and I did this with my son, I share this story. He came home from kindergarten with a pencil that had like fun little characters on it. And he won that pencil for being good in class, whatever he did. Maybe he got an answer right. I honestly don't remember what it was, but he was so excited that he got this prize from his teacher. And I was tired. I was a single mom and I knew I needed to make dinner and all kinds of things. But the look on his face that he had this prize and he wanted to share it with his mommy and tell his mommy what he had done to earn this pencil, that meant the world to him. I listened
Mm.
and I was there with him and I celebrated with him and I asked him questions. Tell me more about this great moment. And oh my goodness. And it made him feel so good. And Melissa, I did that for two reasons. One, you should do that, right? Even the Lord tells us we're to, comfort those who need comforting and we're to meet people where they're at. But I also knew that if my son at a young age understood that I valued him and that the things that he thought were important, that I also thought they were important, and took the time to listen to him, I knew that by the time he became a teenager, where he would naturally probably not want to talk to me that much, he would still remember, because I had modeled it and done it all his life, that I can trust my mom. And if something's bothering me, I can go to her. And if something happens that I want to celebrate, she'll celebrate with me, because he was confident of that, because I always did it. And sure enough, when he became a teenager, sure, did he share everything? Probably not. But that kid really did tell me just about anything and everything. We talked all the time and we still do. And he's 21 years old. And those are the kind of things that parents need to be doing, is that we can't just brush off our kids. We need to take the time to listen to them. We have to take the time to be with them. And yes, you still need to set boundaries where, hey, I'm not going to spend 3 hours talking about this pencil because we've got other things to do, but I am going to give you an appropriate amount of time to celebrate with you. And then we're going to do homework and then we're going to have dinner. You still need to be that leader of your household. But this is important because the truth is I train Planned Parenthood to have those kind of counseling skills with these kids.
Mm.
So if you're not doing it, other people are doing it. So what's happening, Melissa, is that what we're also witnessing is, well, before I say what I'm witnessing, I want to also emphasize the importance of this point that I'm about to make. You need to help your child find a purpose that's appropriate for their age. What is it that they're drawn to at this particular age? Give them a sense of purpose and really nurture that. And the reason I say that is because Planned Parenthood and these ideologies do an amazing job helping these children who feel lost and confused, and they give them purpose within their organization. And so I'm hearing from all over the nation, different leaders in the nation who are saying these kids are coming to the school and they're saying, that we're bigots and that we're discriminating and that we're not inclusive and blah, 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 blah. And so we had to implement all of these controversial programs because this one student came and demanded it. And that student had been trained by Planned Parenthood or the Human Rights Campaign or any of these organizations, and they had been trained on what to say, what the talking points are, and they gave them a sense of purpose that you can change this in your community and in your school. And those kids did it. But if we as parents can be the ones that nurture our own children with purpose, they're not going to need to find that somewhere else. Now, I know that a lot of people, maybe some of the listeners right now are thinking, well, why are you against, LGBTQ? It's not that I'm against them. But what I am saying, though, is, when we should be reaching out. Some people are saying, well, we need to reach out to kids who have same-sex attraction. And I agree with that. And especially when we're looking at statistics on STD rates. The CDC does say that children who have same-sex attraction are at higher risk than their heterosexual peers of getting STDs, of experiencing domestic violence and abuse. They're at higher risk. And so what that tells me is that those children, along with heterosexual children, all should be receiving that same message of protection to not be sexualized. See, many people or Planned Parenthood is saying because they're at higher risk, we need to sexualize them further. We need to give them more access to condoms. But we've been doing this for decades now, and the STD rates continue to skyrocket. They're at this point at epidemic levels. That's not my opinion. Those are the words of the CDC. At epidemic levels for ages 15 to 24 with same-sex attraction kids having the highest risk. So that tells me that we are sexualizing all of the children and children who have same-sex attraction even more. And so the solution for all of these children are the same. That one, I'm really calling parents to help these children to choose to avoid sex at a young age, protect your children so that they're not in situations where it's difficult for them to make the best decision for their health. Basically, be a parent, reclaim parenthood and be a parent. And number two, not allow our government to sexualize our children through comprehensive sex education, because that is not the answer. Comprehensive sex education has been implemented since probably the 50s, when we begin to see STD rates skyrocketing. Ever since sex education was introduced in our country, this comprehensive sex education, the STD rates have continued to rise and rise and rise and rise and rise. And I saw that firsthand as an HIV educator and as a comprehensive sex educator. So today, the very same communities that I conducted outreach in, and I literally went everywhere, walked the streets, knocked the doors. I just want your listeners to understand is that as an outreach educator, street outreach educator, my full-time job was to literally talk about sex 40 hours a week. And it was walking the streets, going to barbershops, beauty salons, community centers, rehab centers, schools, everywhere to talk about this message and pass out condoms and refer them to Planned Parenthood or STD clinics. And those very same communities where they've received so much outreach on comprehensive sex education are still the very same communities who are experiencing the highest rates of STDs. Nothing has changed. So comprehensive sex education is not helping. It is sexualizing both children and adults further, which means that they're just now in a cycle of constantly having to, get treated for diseases, some of which are not curable. And, and now to the point as well is that we have increased the abortion rate. And this is a cycle that is not just affecting all of us physically, but emotionally, The rate of single parenthood has increased. I was a single mom for 9 years, so it's not about saying that single parenthood is wrong or bad. It's not about it's not a judgment call, but it is the fact that families who are single parent families do struggle more financially. Children need both a mother and a father. I saw that. I experienced that with my own son. He agrees a mother and father is necessary to raise a child. And so we're seeing all these negative effects that are being supported by comprehensive sex education, yet we're seeing that more and more people or that the government is trying to support comprehensive sex education even further. And so really, I believe that for me, the position that I'm taking and where I'm focusing on is that I want to strengthen families. I want to strengthen the marriages, parents, their ability to lead in the home, in the community, and through public policy. It's so important because if we're not involved in policy, Melissa, what ends up happening is that sex ed gets mandated in our school and it's exposed to every child. So we have to be involved. We have to be politically involved. We have to be aware of those things. And our children, I think it's great to model to our children that not only do mom and dad lead in the home, but that they lead in their community, community level politics, but also federally in public policy. That's important. And so, I talk to both, parents, blended families, and families of origin, as well as single parents. Like I said, I raised my son for 9 years. So I was able to talk to him about these issues. Even as a single mom, a lot of moms think I can't talk to my son because of the gender issue. Absolutely not. And that we can talk to our children in a way that honors their modesty. So many parents think that we're supposed to teach our children just like comprehensive sex education, except bring it to the home. Absolutely not. That is not necessary. And so I really take the time to teach parents different ways that they can do this. And it's really, Melissa, talking about sex is a lifelong conversation. Mm-hmm. So when I talk to my son about it honestly, it was from being a toddler. And the reason I say that is that you can't talk about sex unless you talk about gender. You can't talk about sex unless you talk about male and female and husband and wife and family and children. And so when I say I've been teaching my child about this his whole life, it's because from the very beginning, I was teaching him about the importance of marriage, the role of a husband and a wife, the role of a parent, a mother and a father, the role of the children in the family, which eventually when he's hitting puberty and it's time to talk about more things, now he understands that sexual intimacy is reserved for the marriage and for family, for the protection of the children, and for intimacy between a husband and a wife that no one else will experience except for this couple, if that's what they choose to do, right? And so really that conversation is a lifelong conversation that can start at a young age, and it's never graphic. It does not have to be graphic.
It's just so interesting, right? I mean, I am just sitting here taking all of this in, and I, to some extent know a lot of it, but I can only imagine what it's like for listeners right now. You have given us so much incredible information about, what unfortunately has happened in our society and is still happening today, but so much just powerful information about the importance of parents. And I was just thinking about this even the other day. And, for listeners who don't know, I'm the mom of two girls. My oldest is 12 and my youngest is 6. And, Monica, you and I have talked about this a little bit personally. My experience growing up was a little bit like yours in the respect that even though I was raised very much in the church, we did not talk about sex. We just didn't, right? It was not a conversation. And, I followed a path that so many young people do, particularly when parents don't talk about this, right? My school had a comprehensive sex educator from, you guessed it, Planned Parenthood, right? And it's Sue Thayer. Wow. People know Sue. I mean, that was the town that I grew up in now has raised up these two pro-life leaders, but you never would have guessed that, right? All those years ago, as Sue was coming into my classroom and, showing us with a banana, right,
how to,
Wow.
right? I mean, I don't even know if I've ever shared that story with you. Sue and I talk about that a lot because there's been a lot of guilt.
No, you never have. I
Oh
know
man,
Sue. I love Sue. And I'm like, wow, no way. Sue
yeah,
taught you that.
our sweet Sue,
Amazing.
right? My husband and I went to the same high
Wow.
school, and he and I, still after 15 years of marriage, blush a little thinking about Sue coming into our respective classrooms, right? Because that was like so crazy and graphic. But that whole experience. So my parents not talking about it, Sue coming into the classroom, creating that relationship, right? Establishing that role ultimately led me to Planned Parenthood for birth control, right? And I was
Wow.
so blind, so naive, had no idea, right, that there was another way. I had no idea that Planned Parenthood did abortions, right? And there was this whole process that I went through that God uncovered to me, um, that I had to grapple with. The fact that I had been there, that I ultimately, then had contact with Planned Parenthood when I worked in the domestic violence and sexual assault agency, right? I saw them as colleagues, and I just had no
Yeah.
idea. And
Yeah.
and
Melissa. Yeah.
Well, and now I look back, right? And as much as we kind of both, and I don't say both, right? Because we're not alone in this, I think we all have to reflect on our journeys and where we are. But I look back on all of that, and I honestly am just so thankful that God has allowed me the opportunity to know different and do different with my own kids.
Yes, yes, and that is exactly what God did for me as well. It's interesting that you talk about Planned Parenthood and seeing them as colleagues in the domestic violence or sexual violence arena, and that's actually the final straw of why I left is because I knew over all those years because as I'm training Planned Parenthood in these private conferences, they would always tell me about cases of statutory rape. It was very common to know that young girls were coming in admitting that they were having sex with men, adult men, not just 16 years old with an 18-year-old. I'm talking about older men, and they would not report it. And I became very interested in learning more about human trafficking in the 90s. Went to a conference on my own. I just wanted to do that and learned about you know human trafficking, the psychology behind it, how the victims react to it, how they protect their trafficker sometimes, and what you can do to help a victim. And so the following year, Title 10, which is the family planning money, which Planned Parenthood receives, and I believe they still receive it. There was some controversy there, but anyway, that particular year, the grant required that all Title 10 clinics learn about human trafficking, learn about the new laws regarding human trafficking, that statutory rape was now considered human trafficking, and that it was a federal offense. And I thought, this is great. I can finally teach Planned Parenthood that them not reporting statutory rape, it has it's now a federal offense. You got to really start looking at this differently. I was given the opportunity to talk to them about human trafficking. They admittedly always really even pridefully admitted that a lot of in their words, that pimps would bring in their girls for testing and abortions at Planned Parenthood. So traffickers see Planned Parenthood as a safe haven for them because they know that Planned Parenthood is not going to report them. And the way that they rationalize that is saying, well, if we don't provide them with testing and treatment and abortion, then these poor women are going to live with these diseases, and that's worse. So we have to protect them, meaning we need to protect the pimp so that the pimp can continue to bring the girls, and we quote unquote care for them, is what they were. That's how they rationalized it. So here I was thinking, okay, I'm going to tell them the truth now. They're going to start reporting. They're going to get it. They're going to understand it. And this is going to change. This, how naive I was. And it was in Corpus Christi, and I had majority of the South Texas Planned Parenthoods coming to Corpus Christi for this training. And I'm explaining to them how to identify a victim of human trafficking, and how, look at, these are the red flags to look for. This is what you can do to report the girl, report this situation, and keep the girl there to, basically to call the police and all this other stuff. And I could tell from their body language that they were dismissing everything I was saying. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, they still think that these girls want this and they don't realize that they're actually victims. So I'm going to share with them the psychology behind victims and how they protect their trafficker. They probably think that they're protecting the trafficker out of, because they want this and not because they've been brainwashed. So I started explaining that, okay, they're probably going to protect their trafficker, but it's only because this and this has happened and they're very afraid. And they continue to just dismiss what I was saying. Their body language, their heads they were just kind of nodding like, no, no, no. And I gave up. I finally said, guys, I don't understand why you're not taking this seriously. Why are you not wanting to report or to view these girls as victims and report human trafficking? And an older nurse raised her hand and she began to school me. And she said, honey, if she's not having sex with this man this month, she'll be with another one next month. And all of the nurses shook their heads in agreement and began to talk about how these girls really wanted this and that they were not victims. And they admitted that they would not report any of these as victims or as human trafficking. They even went as far, and I said, well, whether, regardless of your opinion of these girls, the truth is if she is a minor and she's having sex with an older man, you are required to report that. So I kind of bid put my foot down kind of thing. And their response was this. It was basically saying, if Bush can do or actually it was Clinton, don't ask, don't tell in the military about homosexuality, then we don't have to ask our girls. So if we don't ask them how old their partner is, then we don't have to report it. And so they all agreed that they were just going to turn a blind eye to these young girls who were being trafficked. And that was the last job that I did. I came back to Austin. I reported what they told me to my supervisor, thinking that she would also want to defend women and young girls. She became angry with me and told me my job was to just train these clinics and that it was not my job to be reporting or making judgments. Within a month, she passive aggressively let me know that if I wasn't pro-choice, I also did not belong there. And I knew I didn't belong there. And that was the last straw for me, is that the truth is, for your listeners, you're going to see that comprehensive sex education and all of these different ideologies are going to say that they are trauma informed. They're going to say that they want to end domestic violence. They're going to say that they want to end sexual violence. But the fruit, you can tell them, you can identify them from their fruit. When you see their curriculum and when you see the behaviors that they are supporting, they are not trauma informed. They are not ending domestic violence, and they are not ending sexual assault. They are feeding it. And I say that as a person who lived it and taught it, and by the grace of God, got out of it. And so this is your warning. And I don't mean that as a threat. I'm just saying, I'm sounding the alarm, and I can't force anyone to believe anything. So you either, can take it and believe it, but I think everyone can still get on the same page of saying that parents should be the authority over their children. If you need education on how to talk about STDs because you need to, that's not difficult to do. I can teach you to do that, or you can go straight to the CDC and just get the just information on STDs and what they are. It's not rocket science. We can talk to our children about these things, but I think more than anything is you need to evaluate, mom and dad, where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand on the morality of sexuality? It's not about what the culture is saying. It's not about what everyone seems to be doing. Is what is it that you're going to choose to teach your children for their future? And you need to stand on that. And I'm teaching from a very a moral standpoint. And many people think, well, you can't have a moral standpoint. You have to have a secular message. Absolutely not. This is definitely a war in morality. And there is nothing wrong with a righteous morality. It actually protects children, it protects men, it protects women, it protects us. But I think that that's step number one is where do you stand? And many parents come to me and say, I can't tell my children to not have sex or to think of marriage this way because I'm not living that way. And the truth is, I was a single mom for 9 years. I conceived my son outside of marriage. I scheduled an abortion to abort him through that's another story, but through a good friend of mine, I recognized that he was a real life, and I chose to cancel that abortion. And I absolutely love my son from that moment that I realized he was a real human being with a life. And yes, his father did leave me. And but that didn't stop me from teaching my son what I knew. What I began to learn was the best, which is even though you and I are by ourselves, son, the best thing is to have a mom and a dad. The best thing is to, and of course, it was a lifelong conversation. So I can't share everything I told him in just this one podcast, but I really, really began to teach him that family meant having a mother and a father, that these are the things that this is what we strive for. And sometimes things don't work out, but this is what we strive for. This is what is best for children, to raise children. And as I was describing that to him, he even told me himself in the fifth grade, he said, Mom, that sounds wonderful. He's like, that sounds amazing. And so he understood that even though he and I were by ourselves, God's intention and is that we were to be a family. And so it doesn't matter where we've been. If we've learned what is best, it is our job to teach our children what is best for them. It's so I don't want any parent to feel like they're being a hypocrite for teaching their child what is best. You're doing the right thing when you do that.
Well, and that, of course, jogs that place in my brain. And I know you and I have talked about this too. And this could be a whole other podcast. Like, I hope people reach out to you because even though we have spent so much time together today, I feel like you are just such an incredible wealth of knowledge, and people need to be learning more from you and hearing from you. But briefly, it just jogs in my head, I think, an important point for parents that you and I have talked about, and that's that we need to find healing in our own lives in regards to our own pasts, right? There is this whole underlying issue of, our own personal experiences and how that impacts what we do or don't talk to our kids about. There's shame.
That's right.
There's
That's a
shame,
great
there's
point.
guilt,
Yeah.
there's embarrassment, right? That list goes on and on. And so parents are thinking not only, I'm ill-equipped to have this conversation, or, it's not the right place, it's not the right time, but parents are also going, if I open that door, my kid might start asking me some questions about my own past, and I quite simply don't want to go there.
Right, right. And really, and you're right. The more I get into this work that I'm doing, the more I realize that, at the beginning, I thought, okay, I'm going to teach parents how to talk to their children about sex in a way that honors them, and to talk about waiting until marriage, and that it wouldn't be graphic. And then the more I do this work, I realize that, like you said, Melissa, we need our own healing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is now also become, talking about what is marriage, talking about how we find when we decide that we want to be married, what are we looking for? Who do we have to be? And what are we looking for in someone for a lifelong marriage? So I realize that there's so much, and that's why I say that sex education isn't really just about sex. It's about the whole family. It's about our beliefs on marriage, our beliefs about those relationships, our beliefs on dating, our beliefs on what is a family, what is the role of a parent, what is the role of children. it's all of that put together, and sex is just a part of that. And so I'm excited about it though, because I love doing it. And I just want to tell parents, do not feel ashamed about your past. I have more than most probably have a lot to be ashamed for. And I have felt that. I like to use the word conviction. I have been convicted of it, but I've overcome it. I have found what is best, and I pursue what is best, and is what I taught my son. And if parents think that they have to reveal their past to their children, you absolutely do not. You do not have to share any graphic details about your past with your children, but you can tell them, I used to make, I used to not know better, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I've had the consequences of those mistakes, but now I know what is right and what is good. And my job as a mom is to teach you that, and to teach you what is best and what is good. And so that's what we do. We set the bar high for our kids. And then at the same time, it doesn't mean that we judge or become angry with our children when they fall off and do something that we may not have wanted them to. They need to know that we will always be there for them, that we'll never leave them, that we'll never denounce them, but that we will always be there for them no matter what decision they make.
Oh, serious mic drop right there, all of it. Oh, gosh, I thank you. I mean, I really do. You are just an incredible wealth of knowledge, and I love your transparency and your genuineness. I know people are going to want to learn more from you and about you. So let the audience know how to find you, how to support you, what's next on your radar, Monica.
Oh, well, I have committed this year to be the year of creation. Last year was a lot of public speaking and sounding the alarm, which I'm happy to continue to do. But this year, I'm really focused on creating more resources for parents, training. As I'm creating those, I also want to train parents to be able to train other parents, because I want this to spread everywhere, and help parents reclaim parenthood again. So if you want to follow me, or get more information, or invite me to come and speak in your community, I do these fun table talks, which is just, we sit down, you invite your friends and family to a sit down dinner, whether it's in your home or in your church. But I like to do it in, about 15-20 people. We can make arrangements on that, but we sit at the table together and we discuss together. I present for a little bit, then we have a discussion. And it's really like, family at the table. And it's not about sharing graphic things about one another. It's just really talking about things that we can do to strengthen our families and our relationship with our children. And so a table talk would be a great way to do that. And they can follow me at ittakesafamily.org. That's my website. You can also follow me on Facebook, as long as Facebook allows me to be on there. In that It Takes a Family Inc. You can find me on Facebook. But you can also find my email in It Takes a Family website. So ittakesafamily.org.
Perfect. Okay, I always have one final question that I always ask people who are guests on this podcast, and I'm going to change it up a little bit, maybe. I usually ask people, what would you say to the world when the world says that abortion empowers women? But I think for the sake of our conversation, I need to reframe it. What would you say to people who say comprehensive sex education empowers our culture?
What I would say about that is, we cannot be empowered by a teaching that devalues human life through sex and through abortion. And comprehensive sex education has one goal, and that goal is to sexualize children. There is always a sliver of truth in a false teaching.
Mm.
And comprehensive sex education has really perfected how they deceive people. But at its core, it is comprehensive sexualization education. And you cannot be empowered by anything that sexualizes you.
Boom. Perfect. thank you again, Monica, for being a guest and just for, yeah, again, like I said, your incredible transparency and your genuineness and, letting God lead you to where you are.
Oh, thank you, Melissa, for just allowing me to speak into your podcast and to you, and just really, our relationship is important to me because it's not easy work, and it's always wonderful to be with like-minded people who are also working towards saving life in every area. It's our preborn children as well as the lives of our family and our children. So thank you for all that you do as well.
Thank you.
I know this was a lengthy conversation with Monica, but I feel like it's so important to have. And so thank you for tuning in for part 1 and part 2 now. And do reach out to Monica. She is here and she is ready to equip and inform and empower and encourage you as a parent. So do yourself a favor, follow her on social media, send her an email. And like I said at the beginning of this podcast, don't make this a one and done thing. Do your homework and use Monica as a culture changing, family changing resource. Thanks for joining me this week on Life Empowers. I hope you found our time together to be life affirming, hope building, encouraging, informative. And remember, the next time someone states that abortion is empowering, you know better. Life empowers. See you again next week.